My name is Catherine, and I work at Community CPA. And as you all know, Thursdays are kind of our special days where we invite a guest speaker to come and share something relevant for small businesses. So here today we have with us Kent, who will be talking about credit cards and merchant cards for credit card processing. Obviously, that is a critical part of doing business these days. So you want to, of course, get a great vendor. But, we're here to kind of dispel some of the questions that you might have about this. So Kent, thank you again for being here today. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and your background?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So thanks for having me. First of all, it's nice to be able to talk to everybody and hopefully lend a little bit of my experience. So I've been in financial services for 30 years, the last 18 years in the payment processing space. In 2004, we started an LLC and grew it to about 14,000 customers. And then at that time and during that, over those years, I became very intimately familiar with all the pitfalls in the industry and just decided at that time I could do things differently. So that's when I started Purity Payment Solutions on the foundation of transparency, honesty. We're small business owners ourselves. We have a couple children's hair salons here locally, and just like to just believe, and we know how hard we work, that we want to take care of our clients and treat them with respect and give them the right type of processing. So right now, since 2017, we've grown quickly. We've got about 25-30% of the dentists here locally in Des Moines. We've grown across the country. We do over $50 million in transactions. And like I said, customers from really coast to coast now. So yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. So in terms of like who offers payment processing and how a business owner would go about finding a vendor, can you explain that?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a great question. So there are literally thousands of individuals, companies that you can select from, anywhere from your local bank, brokers. ISOs are independent sales organizations, and then there's typically agents that work for independent sales organizations. Sometimes they're sub-agents working for ISOs and underlying agents. So the best bet is to find a good ISO. A good ISO is a licensed member of the card associations, Visa, MasterCard, and Discover. ISOs place business onto different back-end processors. So you may have heard of First Data or TSYS or Heartland Payment Systems, North American Bank Card. That's where it gets a little tricky is you want to find that ISO that works well for you, that you can trust, that don't have the pitfalls in the industry. So for example, banks and brokers are typically middlemen. Banks don't want to handle the processing. There are some banks that are ISOs, but not many. They usually outsource that. And actually the banks and the middlemen are actually probably earning a commission on each transaction that your businesses process in the form of a profit share or in the form of basis points that they share. So it can be confusing, but once you start asking questions, and we'll kind of go through that in the next 20 minutes or so to kind of vet how you best do that, we can give some good input on how to identify a good processor.
Yeah. So when we are thinking about that, what are some questions that somebody should approach a processor or vendor that they're considering?
Right. Well, like I said, it can be confusing with all of those layers. So how do you find it? How do you select, and what questions do you ask? Well, the number one thing, like I said, ask whether they do the processing. Are they the ISO? Who do they partner with? Are there different layers involved? So we've kind of covered that. The biggest thing for me is to always ask about the processing contract. So are there long-term contracts? If you cancel, are there any cancellation provisions? Are there setup costs to begin processing? And what are the costs for the types of equipment you may need? You may need a credit card terminal. You might need a point of sale device. Are there annual fees? Those are some of the ways to drill down into who has your best interest in mind. Do they have free terminal options that are truly free? And that's where some of the gotchas come into play. There are a lot of bad leases out there that you end up paying a lot more for a piece of equipment than you should be paying. And we'll get into that a little bit more too in terms of some of the gotchas that we've seen. But the key is to find somebody that really has your best interests in mind, a relationship where they don't want to just sign you up, acquire you, and then send you off to a different call center where you're in hold lines and in wait times and things like that. You want to have somebody that really has your best interest in mind. So somebody that really wants to create a relationship with you.
Yeah, for sure. So in your industry, have you seen small business getting taken advantage of, and what are some of those pitfalls that you've seen?
Absolutely. Good question. So unfortunately, yes. There are good processors out there. So I don't want to paint a bad picture of our industry in its entirety, but there are also many who are not. So I've seen business owners get stuck with 3-year contracts. So like I said, first thing to do, check. Do you have a long-term contract? Is there early cancel provisions? Is there, because lots of times what they're doing, they're locking you into a contract, because then Visa, MasterCard, Discover, and the associations, they usually do have twice annual rate increases because of fraud and things in that industry. But what you don't want to have happen is your processor to tack on rate increases during that time. So that's one way. Obviously, adding in item fees and things like that when those twice annual rate increases are put into place, that can quickly get your pricing out of line with what it should have been or what it was when you were quoted. So, and then also like in equipment, there's a lot of terms where business end up paying 20 times the cost of the equipment because, for example, a standard terminal, I actually have a couple of them here, but a standard credit card terminal, there's newer ones that have newer technology, but even if that ends up being $250 or $300, I've seen evergreen leases that auto renew, and I've seen clients spend $1,500 or more for that piece of equipment. So I'm not a big fan of leases. They're good in certain situations when equipment's coming outdated, but a lot of this equipment's pretty updatable. So you just got to be careful. And again, you can kind of get a good sense when you start talking to somebody if they're really have your best interest in heart. And always look at the things that you sign. I think that's the biggest thing too. Have somebody that if you don't understand it, have somebody that does kind of read through those contracts.
Right. So when you're talking about pricing, can you tell us a bit about how credit card transactions are priced and what's fair?
Yeah, for sure. So that's where it gets a little complicated. But the key term in the credit card processing space is interchange. So interchange is essentially the cost of a particular credit card transaction. So what makes it even more confusing is there are literally over 200 interchange rates based on how you accept cards in your business and what types of cards your customers pay with. So, for example, if you have a standard credit card, those are becoming fewer and further between because most of them have rewards attached to it. But a standard credit card is going to carry a lower rate than, say, a reward card, where essentially you as the merchant are paying for that rewards that are on that card in the form of interchange. So business cards, corporate cards, foreign cards all have a higher interchange. And then coupled with that is how do you accept it? Did you take it through your credit card machine? Was it chip inserted, swiped? Did you key it in? That factors into that interchange rate as well. So that's why there are so many different types of interchange. It's really a product of multiple things, which makes how you choose processing a little more confusing, but we'll get into that too in terms of how you can simplify it a little bit more for yourself and hopefully protect yourself as well. So, and there's things like, if you think about a debit card transaction is probably the lowest cost transaction because the funds are essentially coming out of the cardholder's bank account and going directly through your merchant account and into your bank account. So that is real money that the credit card issuers know is there and the processors know are there. So that tends to be a lot lower. And we'll talk a little bit more about how those are priced here in a little bit to give you a better idea of those different interchange rates.
Awesome. So yeah, I know that when you're talking to a vendor, there are these different plans that you can choose from. Can you tell us a bit about like what would be good plans or what the options are?
Absolutely. So, there are about 4 or 5 main types of plans. They're called tiered, interchange plus, flat fee programs, cash discount surcharge programs. So When selecting a plan, we really like Interchange Plus, and a lot of transparent processors really like that program because you get the benefit of the interchange rate on that card plus a small markup for service. So that gives you really a lot more control versus flat fee programs that may have standard overall rates where a lot of the spread is going toward your processing company. So let's just say, for example, your business is predominantly debit cards. So you're in an area where there's a lot more debit card usage. Those carry, as we mentioned, a very low interchange rates. So it's going to be a lot cheaper to have an Interchange Plus program than it is to say having a 2.25 flat fee program with the transaction fee, which transaction fees are always attached to that. I'll give you another example. Say a processor prices you at, let's just say it's Interchange Plus 20. And that'd be 20 basis points. So if a debit card is say 0.50, and there's a lot that goes into different debit card rates, but if it's a 0.50 rate and you have an Interchange Plus 20 basis points, you would pay 0.70 for that transaction. And then, as I mentioned, there's typically a per transaction fee as well. So, that can range anywhere from 5 cents up to 20 cents based on your volume. So the other thing, the reward cards, maybe a standard reward card is a 1.5. So you tack on that 20 basis points and then it's 107, or I'm sorry, it's 1.70% for that transaction. Think of a customer that pays on your website. That's a card not present transaction. So essentially that's going to carry a higher rate because of the fact that they're keying that information into your website. E-commerce transactions are naturally more of a cost. So say it's 2.2, that would be a 2.40 rate, and then your per transaction rate that you were quoted. So that's kind of a way with Interchange Plus to break down and make it simple where you get the benefit of the interchange plus a small markup for a good processor that provides good service. So I'll kind of carry on. I mean, there's a few other programs, flat rate programs I kind of touched on. So you might see where they say it's a flat 2.50 with no transaction fee, but then they charge you $99 a month. So those types of programs are often, they allow the processors to earn more money because of that spread they're making. While they seem simpler, and they are kind of, because you're thinking, I don't have any transaction fees, it's a flat fee program, I'm fine with that. You just don't get that benefit of lower interchange type credit cards. So in those programs, those Interchange Plus programs might only be $15 a month versus the $99 a month, and you get the benefit of the interchange. So yeah, and then some plans that are becoming more and more popular are cash discount and surcharge programs. Surcharge programs are now, I believe, legal in 48 states and probably will be legal in those other two soon because credit card rates are increasing by the nature of fraud. But those allow you to pass on the cost of the credit card. Usually those are marked a little higher at 3% or 4% because there's various pricing that goes into that where you're not charging the monthly fees. So then you pass that 3% on in the form of a surcharge line. You have to be careful with that because you have to follow all the rules of the card associations to ensure that you have everything buttoned down in terms of signage and things along those lines. But you can do that. You cannot surcharge debit cards. So that's an important thing to realize. The cash discounts where you say, okay, I'm going to pass that on at 3.5%, 4%, but then I'm going to allow you to receive a discount if you pay by cash. And there are programs and POS systems that you can actually apply that discount. So it's pretty transparent. So they get one price at credit and then one price at cash and then the lower price at if they I'm sorry, vice versa, sorry about that. But yeah, so essentially you have to weigh whether or not it makes sense versus a lower Interchange Plus program to include those markups in your margins of cost of goods sold. So tiered programs is the last one, going on and on about these, but tiered programs, they break down different interchange categories into, like, say, a non-qual, mid-qual category, qualified, mid-qual, non-qual. And that's whereas the reward-based cards or foreign cards might be downgraded, that would fall into a non-qualified category. So those carry higher than the standard qualified categories. Those tend to be where a lot of processors, there are fair tiered programs, but a lot of processors have leniency within those to maybe put two categories together at the expense of you, the merchant, and therefore making more spread on it. So it can be a little bit less transparent. It doesn't have to be if you're with the right partner on that. So that was probably clear as mud, but I went through pretty quick. But yeah, those are the main programs. And gosh, we haven't even talked about point of sale systems yet.
Yes.
Like
So obviously point of sale is a huge, concern and consideration for many of our small business owners. Can you talk to us about how a business would determine what is right for them?
Yes. So one thing to think about in point of sale is there are, again, like processors, there are 1,000 different point of sale systems. So it's always a very good idea to keep your processing relationship separate from your point of sale relationship. So many times the point of sale companies will say, we'll take care of your processing. Well, again, they're not the ISO, and they're typically probably sharing in the proceeds from the transactions. So ultimately, it's nice to have that processing relationship where you know that's static and level, where you control that part of it, and then you're only paying for the POS monthly costs. So you keep those two things separate, and usually that's in your best interest. Sometimes that's not possible because the POS company locks you into a particular processor. That's always a red flag for me. But at the same time, you just have to be vigilant about watching your rates and making sure there isn't escalation over time. My example is dental clients locally. I've taken a lot of dental clients out of software systems where they're processing through their dental practice management software systems. And what happens, and I see $8,000, $18,000 annual savings because they've stayed with them for 4 or 5 years, and each year they've taken rate increases. And it's just, to me, it's unethical and something that I don't think is right. We're trying to work with a lot of those companies to actually make sure it's more transparent and you can control both. But the integrations sometimes allow for putting credit card data back into those software systems, so it makes usability a little bit more friendly. So POS systems there are a lot of really good POS systems that cross all verticals. Restaurants, for one, there might be one that's good for quick service, or one that's better for table service. There might be ones that are specific to specific categories like auto shops or meat markets and things like that have more specific things within that. A good processor is going to help you find a good POS company. They're going to do their research. They're going to try to line you up with a processor that's going to allow you to keep your processing separate, but also ones that are going to be fair and honest with their fees. If you just need a terminal, you just need a credit card terminal, and then that's separate. You can still have a POS system and keep your processing separate with a separate machine. It just usually means you have to key the amount into your POS system to keep track of what the sale was. Restaurants, and I actually can show you one. Got one behind me. I don't know how well it'll come up, but this is a POS system that we put a lot of people in that allows you to keep your processing separate. No idea if you can even see that, but it's a nice POS system. It allows restaurants to have tables, and then you click on a table, and then you can drill down into pay by guest, separate those out. Very simple to use. And these are really good for both quick sale as well as table service restaurants. Provide a lot of functionality with employee management, fingerprint login, so you keep track of employees and their time schedules. And a lot of the apps that go along with these standard POS systems cross over, where there's a lot of apps that are free to be able to do that. Discounting, gift cards. The gift card themselves aren't free, but they're pretty affordable. For 100, you might be able to get them for $100, and then it's like a 2% on the load for the gift card. So then you can do custom gift cards and a variety of those things with your POS. So But like I said, a good processor is going to help you find the right solution for your needs, and or make sure that they advise you in the right way to keep that processing and POS separate if that is possible.
Okay, so you normally work with not just the customer that you're working with, but also their POS vendor. Is that?
Yes, yeah. So there are a lot of restaurants that are clients of mine that actually already have POS systems in place. So
Right.
oftentimes we can go in and we can modify the back end by providing a merchant identification number, terminal identification number that they then plug in. So even if you're with, say, some of the big players out there in the restaurant industry, or like Aloha, Maitre d', we can work with your POS company to separate that processing out and go in, and then your processing is that's called open to open processing. So they allow you to actually switch the processor. So that's a one way to don't feel like if you're locked into a POS already today that you can't take a look at your rates and fees, because you most certainly can do that. And it's wise to do that. So yeah, can absolutely work with different POS companies. You just have to be careful on those that have tied in relationships where those POS companies are forcing you to go to one processor, because typically that's not in your best interest.
Right. So we do have a question from the audience. They're asking about the best system for a local coffee shop that's focused on beverages, sandwiches, and pastries, none of which are big transactions, so small transaction items. Joe, I don't know if you want to elaborate on if they're looking for the POS part or the processing part. But yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So there are really good solutions for lower ticket. So a coffee shop, a pastry shop, you may have a lower ticket per ticket at 10 to 15. And we didn't even get into that earlier, but lower tickets, if you're above about $10 to $12 on a ticket size, it's best to have your own merchant processing account. So the POS that you may look at for something like that, there's aggregators like Square. Clover allows you to have your own merchant account to control your rates more with a good processor. So let me just back up a little bit and talk aggregator versus having your own processing account. So Square as an aggregator there's PayPal out there, there's Square. You're essentially one of millions of merchants that process under the same merchant account. So you don't have control over that pricing. Those are usually flat fee programs. I believe Square, I don't have it right in front of me. I believe they're 2.6 and 10 cents for card present transactions. And then for keyed in transactions, they're like over three, or high twos. I think they're over 3 and then 15 cents a transaction. So as we talked about earlier, having your own account is going to save you money on the processing side. If you went into a system like, say, a Clover, you're able to control that processing, still use a very affordable POS. In fact, I just looked at that for a customer the other day, and our pricing for Clover is identical to the hardware for Square. So that's something that makes sense to look at. It kind of depends on where your ticket is at, your per ticket amount, on what makes most sense between a Square and a Clover. But we do the analysis on that. We have documents when you can compare both of those to make sure it's in your best interest from a processing standpoint. And then I will say one other thing with regard to pastry shops and things like that. For me, it's so important to make sure that customers are taken care of, that you want your processor, if they're working on your POS, to load in your menus, to be there for you for the first 1 or 2 days that you're processing, to train staff, to make sure they're comfortable with it. You want to have a processor that's willing to work with you to build in online orders and online sales, if you're choosing to do that, which has been big during COVID, and you want to put the right tools into place. So that's something that is important, that you find a processor that really wants to do that, and you can create a relationship with and is there for you on those things. So that was a long answer to a short question.
No, I love it. I think this has been an issue with small shops that are looking for affordable options. So I will connect you with Joe afterwards. We also have somebody who raised their hand. Is that okay for you to have?
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Hi, now, did you have anything you wanted to say?
Yes. Sorry, I'm starting at work, and today we have parents teacher conference, and I'm the teacher here, so I'm on and off just in case if my parents are coming, then I will need to walk away from the training in here. But yeah, I think my questions is related to what you have earlier, that because I have not have any experience of using any of these systems, so I would like to know more about it, just in case the parents are coming interrupt my training here, and I really want to get know more about the system, because I am running a bakery, and it's like a family bakery. And so far, I was trying to do research and try to find more about a different program, but still I don't, just because I don't know more about the different programs on the different systems, and I'm still haven't used it. And so is there in the future, how can I connect with you to get more details on how to use this?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the end of this, I'll give you my contact information if Catherine's okay with that, and then happy to kind of look at that for you. I would say that, we talked about two things. We talked about the processing program and how you're priced. That coupled with a POS system that's going to work for you in the bakery industry, something that handles your inventory, that you can track your inventory, that can tell you your cost of goods sold and some of those things. Those come standard in a lot of really good POS systems that are very affordable on a month-to-month basis. And when I say affordable, I mean, there are POS systems out there where you can spend $200 a month, but there's many POS systems where, depending on the level, if you don't need dining as associated with it, even if you needed dining associated with it, that may only be $60 a month. Or you may only need certain elements where you don't need dining, and that may be $30 a month. So there are very affordable tools for quick service and bakeries that you could load in all of your inventory, that keeps track of that, but also gives you the great reporting capabilities of what did you do last week, what did you last month, what are your trends from month to month, and how are your sales going. So there are really good systems out there, and I'd be happy to help you out on that, and see if we could look at some different systems to show you. So, and happy to give you that contact information.
That would be great.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for teaching too. My wife's a teacher.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So lastly, let's talk. We're running out of time. So let us know any final thoughts on comparing rates and fees to ensure that a business is getting the best possible deal.
Absolutely. So one thing that I always tell people to do is, if you're already with a processor today, you're unsure, you signed up 2-3 years ago, what are my rates at today? I think the best thing to look at is your effective rate. So what you can do is you can look at your effective rate by taking what was my expense, and that'd be on a processing statement. So what was my expense last month? Divide that expense by the amount that you process. That gives you a ballpark percentage of what you're paying today. That's going to fluctuate month to month, but because of the types of cards you may accept, there'll be a trend. So you start to get a feel for consistency in the types of cards. So that's a starting point. It's not the end all, because there's monthly fees associated within that you might be able to eliminate to further reduce that overall percentage. So I would ask for a side-by-side comparison from a processor, and make sure that you ask all the questions we've talked about in this webinar, to make sure that you're working with somebody that's not going to have those long-term contracts, that's going to treat you fair with equipment or POS systems, and just drill down into the service levels. I mean, will you have a point of contact at the company? Will you be sent to a big call center, a phone tree? Some of the things we've already talked about. Are they going to give you their mobile number to call whenever you need to call them? Because there are things that come up. For us, we absorb hold times. I don't like to have my customers wait on those hold times. So we do that when there is a third party involved. And then we bring you on a 3-way call if it's remote, or oftentimes locally we can come to you and address issues, especially like with training. So yeah, that's really, I guess, my best guidance is those questions, and looking at your pricing and looking at your options, and and just asking some of the questions that we went over today.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciated this. So how will someone contact you, Kent?
Yeah, so you know what, I'll just give you my mobile number. So if anybody wants to give us a call or shoot me a text, my mobile number is 515-778-8995. And you can feel free to utilize that number, and we'll get back to you. And then, we'd welcome anybody that would want to take a closer look at their processing or have questions about different systems or things like that. And you can even go to my website. My website is puritypay.com. So it's PURITYPAY.com, all one word. You can see testimonials and look at our unique propositions of what we do for small businesses, and even upload those statements to do a no obligation. For us, the comparisons are good to do. You may be priced in a good spot and you don't have to move. And in that case, we tell you that too. So happy to do a review on those things and help out CPA clients however we can. So. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kent. We really appreciate your time here and sharing
Absolutely.
with us from your experience.
Yeah. For sure.
Thanks everyone for being on today. And let me know if you'd like me to connect you, and I will be happy to do that after this webinar.
Yeah. Thank you, Catherine. Appreciate everybody.
Take care, everyone.
Yeah. Have a great day.